So you saw NVIDIA's announcement and it's time to upgrade. Whether you've got a 1080 Ti, a 2080 Ti, or something in between, you're probably wondering where the 3080 fits in. I'm Ron Burke, Editor-in-Chief for GamingTrend.com. Let's unbox this thing. Before we get into all of that though, I don't want to hear anything about my wiring. There isn't a whole lot in the box. Once you pull the top lid, you'll find the card itself, no surprise there. Here we've got that new rear venting system that we'll talk about in a few. In fact, there are quite a few changes to the overall cooling design for us to take a look at in this video. These two holes are for optional mounting stability. This is the new proprietary 12-pin connector. It's angled, which makes it much easier to route cables and plug in. Also inside the box, once I can get it open, is the warranty information, as well as the Y adapter that you'll need to power the card. Let's take a second and talk about the case. So traditionally, a case pulls in their air from the front and it routes in kind of an S pattern out the back. In my case, I have a water cooler for my CPU, so I have two fans to pull the air away from my system. The problem, like you see on a 1080 Ti, is that the fans are in the wrong position. So when it's mounted, the fans are pushing air down towards your power supply, and it's a really hard pull to get up here and back out of your case. So NVIDIA redesigned the 3080's cooling system to be a push-pull system. So that same S pattern, when the air comes up, it goes through these fins on the bottom and out this fan and then out the back. But also on this side, you have another set of fans. So that air comes in, it goes into this fan, and then it comes out the vents in the rear. It created a much more efficient system that somehow is actually 10 decibels quieter. How about that? This exploded view gives you the NVIDIA explanation for all that nonsense I just said, and it does it far more succinctly. In that exploded view, you could see the hybrid vapor chamber fins with the fans on top, which comprises a great deal of the end of this card. And with this light, you can see just how well it'll allow heat to pass through. Here's a closer look at the Unibody construction of this card. It's very sleek and represents a ton of hours of engineering work by the NVIDIA team. This rear air vent is part of that S-shaped airflow control we talked about earlier. Unfortunately, we did lose the dedicated USB-C VR port that we had in the 2080 Ti. Here we see those dedicated mount ports again. How about a side-by-side of the rear design of the 1080 Ti, 2080 Ti, and 3080? The 1080 Ti is all function over form and looks like a working prototype next to the Unibody Construction of the 3080. Here's that same shot, but with the 2080 Ti. While it's much better, I think we can agree that the 3080 takes the crown. Stacked on top of one another, you can see that these cards have been getting slightly larger each generation, though well within spec for a mid-size case. Speaking of the case, let's get this thing loaded up so we can get to those benchmarks. It's painless to hook up the Y connector, and they just clip right into the 12-pin connector on the side. With that, we're ready to go. With the device installed, let's button up the case and get to work. We chose a handful of games that should push the card, or at least attempt to. As you'll see, we hit quite a few processor bottlenecks, even on a 10th gen Intel. The ones we chose to benchmark are Assassin's Creed Origins, Borderlands 3, Hideo Kojima's Fever Dream Death Stranding, Tom Clancy's The Division 2, Far Cry 5, F1 2020, Horizon Zero Dawn, Metro Exodus, the 2020 version of Microsoft Flight Simulator, Red Dead Redemption 2, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and finally, Wolfenstein Youngblood. Let's get to the benchmarks. We benchmarked 3 generations of cards, namely the ones you've seen in this video. At 1080p, we see some pretty remarkable numbers, but not massive jumps. This is where we're maxing out the CPU, leaving the GPU waiting for input. We'll have to push the card to really see those gains. Now we're getting somewhere. At 1440p, we start to see the 3080 pull away from the pack, especially with F1 2020 and Death Stranding. What's interesting is that giving the GPU more to do has driven some of these numbers up instead of down. You heard that right. This card does better at 1440p than 1080p. Crazy. Jumping to 4K, we see huge improvements. All of these were run at ultra settings. That makes the 3080 the true king of 4K 60. But playing at 4K in the hundreds? Yeah, that's where it's at. So this is day 1. New drivers, game updates, and continued optimization by NVIDIA will only drive these numbers higher, provided my CPU can keep up. We've got a full rundown on this card at gamingtrend.com that covers all of this as well as a whole host of features not in this video. Drop by and check it out for yourself. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this or found any value in it, hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you again very soon.